Good evening, I'm Lukman Haris, and this is Market Talk. We have interviewed many property developers on this show before, but probably none of them have had a journey like the one with us today. Property developer and integrated facilities management company Damansara Realty has been in the news a lot lately after recently embarking on a monumental transformation of the group. This is part of the efforts to return the company to profit after consecutive quarters of being in the red. Damansara Realty is still in the red, but have seen things improve since embarking on the transformation. And joining me today to discuss more is its Group Chief Executive Officer, Brian Iskandar Zulkarim. Brian, welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure to be here, Lukman.
Since taking over as Group CEO in September 2016, on the back of continuous losses for the company, the biggest loss in a decade in FY16, a net loss of 27 million ringgit. Since then, you have spearheaded a transformation effort for the group. So where are we with that transformation?
I came in September last year, and from the beginning, the board has given a mandate of the important requirement for the company to have a proper direction. And to do that, when I came in, I tried to understand the business and what are the challenges facing by the company. It's like having a sickness. So what's the sickness? What's the diagnostics? What was the root cause of the problem? So we studied that and we came up with a strategic and restructuring plan, which we call the SRP. And from there, we realized a few key things. Among others, we saw that the group has a lot of companies and the companies are working in silos. The companies each have something that they chase after, but never as a group. So they lost the advantage of synergy. And then we saw on the property sector, we've got land banks, but there wasn't enough efforts to accelerate whatever projects that we have. And because of the situation of the company, in terms of governance, we realized that a lot of SOPs are not in place. Group approval, limit of authority, all these processes that has to be refined. And that, when we set all that and come up with the SRP, we realized that within 6 months, it has already shown results. And right now, we have 3 main business segments, which is land and property development. And then we have the integrated facilities management business and also the project management consultancy. And what's interesting is the integrated facilities management business was created as an evolution of a business segment, of a few business segments. We have Metro Parking, which does parking. And we have TMR Urus Harta, engineering facilities management, and we have HC Dura Clean, which does cleaning.
Indeed, these 3 companies represented pretty much the first phase of the transformation. You have said before that these 3 companies were growing in its own direction. That and all the problems or issues you've mentioned before, why were so many things falling through the cracks for Damansara Realty? Why were there so many issues with before you came?
Okay, I think it's from the acquisition. I'm not sure what happened during the acquisition, but as far as I'm concerned, was after Seaview took over in 2014, all these companies are put under the portfolio of Damansara Realty Berhad, and so Damansara Realty Berhad, from being a J Corp company, it has to spawn off on its own and redefine itself. So I think that could be the problem. But rather than looking at why that happened, our focus was more on what can we do moving forward. And this is what we realized. We realized that in the industry today, people would want to go to, infrastructure owners would want to go to a one-stop facilities management solution provider. Gone are the days where, you appoint one company to do engineering facilities management, M&E, another company to do cleaning, another company to do landscaping. So a lot of infrastructure owners realize that they have the economies of scale if they come to one solution provider for integrated facilities management. And that's exactly what we did. And the interesting thing about it was, when we have, it's not just parking, cleaning, and engineering. It spawned off to new businesses that we thrive on. Cabin management, landscaping, laundry management, F&B. We are big in Pengerang, in Rapid Petronas facility. And we have even gotten a recognition and award from Petronas for exceptional service on cabin management and F&B.
Right, so that's pretty much the first strategy, as I've mentioned before, integrating the company's IFM side, or Integrated Facilities Management, represented by 3 companies, MR Urus Harta, HR Duraclean, and also Metro Parking. So what are the other grand strategies of this transformation for the whole group that we should expect moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, Integrated Facilities Management is one, and as I mentioned just now, it spawns off new businesses within that business segment. And then we have properties and land development. We have land banks. We have land banks in Kuantan. We have more than 500 acres of land in Kuantan. We have 63 acres in Johor. And so we realized that we could accelerate our development plan for our existing land banks. So we have Damansara Hills project in Kuantan, which we revived. And we are actually now looking at, we are at planning stage for Damansara Hills 2. We're looking also at developing a commercial land in Damansara Hills, Kuantan. And we also have a plot of land in Johor that we're looking at some commercial development, in addition to our existing Central Park project in Tampoi, Johor.
Is this the second phase of the transformation project?
It's a continuation of the first phase and second phase of the project.
And you target to start that second phase in the second half of this year. We are pretty much in the second half of this year. So are you there? Are you on track?
We are on track. We're actually ahead of schedule from what we have planned. The good thing is we have a very good team, and we've gotten a very good support from the board. So we have a very supportive board members, and of course our executive vice chairman, Datuk Daeng Malik, has been a very good supporter to all the plans that we wanted to do.
And indeed, results are showing. We'll go into that a bit later. First, we have to take a short break. We'll return with Brian Iskandar Zulkarim, Group CEO of Damansara Realty Market Talk. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Market Talk. I've been speaking to Brian Iskandar Zulkarim, Group CEO of Damansara Realty. Brian, before the break, we talked about the first phase of the transformation program, and you are now just entering the second phase of that transformation. But I don't think I've had enough clarity as to what to expect from the second phase of this transformation that is going to be, I think, beneficial for the group. Can you just shed more light on this?
I don't want to reveal too much on the second phase because of there are certain projects that we're embarking on that we need to keep its confidentiality. So it's not that I don't want to answer, but there are more projects coming in. All I can say, more projects coming in the IFM sector, and planning for new projects on the property side as well.
All right. From the first phase, which is the integration of your 3 integrated facilities management subsidiaries, the results are showing from that first phase, because you've been languishing in the red for the longest time. You are still recording a loss, but it has narrowed significantly. In the first quarter of 2017, net loss was 1.34 million ringgit compared to close to 4 million ringgit in the same period last year. So do these results hint towards a more successful and bigger turnaround for the entire group going forward?
That's what we anticipate. Our EBITDA is already positive in quarter 1, and that's a swing of 7 million ringgit. So we are expecting very good results. Unfortunately, I cannot reveal the results for quarter 2 until we announce it in Bursa. But we are very optimistic moving ahead, and barring any unforeseen circumstances, we expect an operating profit for the entire year of 2017 and moving forward.
That has been your target from the start. But back to the second quarter results, rumors have it that it is exceeding expectations. Can you care to comment on that?
Yeah, I wish I could. I'm very excited to say something, but again, because of regulation, I cannot really, until we announce it. All I can say is just wait for our announcement. I'm excited.
Yeah, you have recently expressed hope that the company will return to the black by the end of this financial year. So seeing the momentum that you are gaining, is this a foregone conclusion for you?
Again, we are excited, but we cannot. I have to be very careful with the words, the choices of words that I use. We anticipate an operating profit for the rest of the year, and time will tell. Just wait for our announcement in about a month's time on our Q2 results, and throughout the year up until 2019, we anticipate a lot of good news.
Right. Nonetheless, you mentioned that you cannot go too deep into the numbers, but I'm just going to try my luck. Your auditors have expressed concerns on your liabilities, which, as at last year, exceed your assets by about 155 million ringgit. So it's a pretty unhealthy ratio. So how has this transformation exercise, despite still being in the first phase and just entering the second phase, how has this affected that number, if it has affected at all?
Okay, first of all, this goes back to 2002. 2002, there was a development agreement between Damansara Realty Berhad and Jacob. And the agreement says that, Damansara Realty Berhad could acquire the land, the 63 acres in Johor. And at the time, it was an interco arrangement. So when Seaview took over in 2014, there was a deadline set for this development agreement to be settled. So because of this, you've got that liability of 150 million. So once this agreement is settled, which we've already gotten approval from the shareholders, and once it's settled in Q3 this year, it will be reduced by 120 million and immediately turn around the ratio.
I want to go back a bit to what you mentioned just now and also earlier of Seaview taking over in 2014. You now have full control over all the subsidiaries, and you, of course, monitor them diligently. But back then, before you came in, you guys have been languishing in the red. So what was it? Was it a lack of governance, or was it a lack of foresight that these companies were, as you mentioned, operating in silos and therefore were not effective on their own and not effective for the group?
Basically, you've said it all. I do not want to elaborate on that because, as I mentioned, I don't want to really look at the past, especially the people before me, what they did right or did wrong. I'm just looking forward on how we can bring up the Damansara Realty Berhad to greater heights.
You've also said that you're exploring options to raise funds.
Oh,
what
yes.
can we expect?
Yes. Last year, we proposed for raising redeemable convertible notes, RCN, and bonus warrants to assist with our working capital. Because of the projects that we're embarking on, we're looking at capital aid through this exercise as well.
Let's go on to one of your more significant developments, the Central Park in Tampoi, Johor, your JV with Hong Kong-listed Country Garden. Country Garden's development in Forest City came under pressure. It got quite some publicity when China stepped up capital controls. Do you think you're exposed to such a risk?
Country Garden is one of the biggest developer from China, and they have projects all over the world. So we haven't had any problems with them in terms of raising capital or financial, or whether there's any financial difficulty. So far, it has been good, and we think we have a good partner. And they are the ones that help us with the acquisition of the land that I mentioned earlier. So in terms of capital control, which affects Chinese buyers, that is not within our radar, because our Central Park property is being most of the bookings for our up to 90% of the bookings for our properties in Central Park are by locals. So we are not looking at the Chinese market for the property that we build at Central Park. It's for the locals.
Interesting that you mentioned that, because that brings me to my next point. Do you really have locals as your primary market for all your residential developments?
At the moment, yes.
I will return with Brian Iskandar Zulkarim, Group Chief Executive Officer of Damansara Realty. Market Talk will be right back. Don't go anywhere. You're back with me, Lukman Haris, on Market Talk. I've been speaking to property developer Damansara Realty, and specifically its Group Chief Executive Officer Brian Iskandar Zulkarim. Brian, for the break, we talked about some of the developments that you have, some of the main ones, including Central Park in Tampoi, Johor, and even Damansara Hills in Kuantan, where you mentioned that starting prices for these developments start at about 350,000 all the way to 750,000. So we were just discussing about the general affordability of not just your projects, but all the developments in Malaysia in general. Do you think such projects will be affordable for the common Malaysian to buy?
There was a recent survey done by Radar that mentioned the price bracket of 300,000 to 750,000 still has a lot of demand. Of course, if you talk about affordable housing for Malaysians, there are two different definitions. There's also the definition that's set by the government, for example, low-cost housing that is priced between 150 to below 300,000. So these are the two markets where there's a demand. For developers, anything below 300,000, there's a lot of cost factor they have to look into. Land cost, and then there's stricter lending rules, and also if you look into there are some good regulations coming in, for example, regulations on traffic management, environment, waste management. So all these things has created has ensured that the cost goes up, and even material and labor cost has gone up. So developers has a tendency to build properties that are 300,000 above. With that said, for us, we are in support of the government as much as we can, and that is why we are in the PPA1M project as well, and that is a project for housing for government servants. So
we've been facing a property glut in Malaysia, whether be it residential or commercial. We've been seeing an increasing number of unsold units, because a lot of quarters are complaining that developers are building houses that are too expensive. But you are now saying that this is because of the development costs. Are you saying that developers don't really have a choice but to build houses that are considered expensive, 350,000 ringgit and above? They don't have any choice.
This is where a more detailed study needs to be looked holistically, by the rule makers, by the government, to sit down together with the developers and to see why is it that anything below 300,000 is something that is very tight for developers to build. And as I mentioned, in our case, for PPA1M project, it makes it viable for us, because not only that we're building residential, but we're given a plot of land adjacent to it to build some commercial development. So it balances things out and it makes the project viable.
But PPA1M is only certain people are eligible to get PPA1M, or to actually buy, or to actually benefit from the particular project. Coming back to the property glut in Malaysia, we are seeing an increasing increase of unsold units. Do you think it's wise to further intensify development in such a market condition?
It depends on the location. It depends on the bracket of pricing that you're building and who you're building it for. So the answer is yes. The economy has been improving, and we are optimistic of the take-up rates for properties in the future.
But not just the economy in general, but specifically the property glut. Do you think that you would play a role in feeding that glut more in Malaysia?
We don't think so, because as far as we're concerned, for existing projects, we've gotten healthy take-up rates, and it has been very positive so far for us. So we are very careful in choosing whatever project they wanted to do, to make sure that it is not something like you mentioned, that would amplify the current property glut.
But would you agree with me if I say that there is a property glut in Malaysia?
To a certain extent, and depending on the location, yes.
And you mentioned just now development costs for developers in Malaysia is at a certain level where developers have to bill at least 350,000 ringgit and above. The budget 2018 is just coming around the corner. Do you have any wish list for the government to announce to possibly reduce the cost of development for developers so that they can build cheaper homes for Malaysians?
Exactly. So you've taken the words out of my mouth. Exactly that. If we can have a more holistic approach to this, more detailed analysis and study that would take into consideration a win-win situation for everyone, I think such a problem could be easily, in terms of demand for housing, could be tackled by the government more effectively.
But I think we don't need to wait for the government to produce or to embark on a detailed study. I think developers can start a detailed study by themselves, right?
Because it also relates to other things that involves regulation, from the regulation on lending to the regulation on or incentives on land costs. So those are things that needs to be looked into, in my opinion, because by the end of the day, it's not that developers like us are not interested to help the government in providing more housing for the people. We are, but it has to make business sense for us as well.
All right. We are now just entering the second phase of transformation for Damansara Realty. You've done quite a positive job on the first phase of transformation. Congratulations. So what can we expect moving forward? What can your shareholders expect moving forward from the group?
We will have more announcement to come, from our Q2 results to new projects that we are about to secure. And this announcement will come out in due time, very soon. We look forward to it for the month of August, especially.
All right. Thank you so much, Brian Iskandar Azul Karim, Group Chief Executive Officer of Property Development Company Damansara Realty. And that wraps up this edition of Market Talk. What do you think of the conversation? Send us all your feedback on all our social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram at 501 Awani. Download our app you've seen this now. And listen to this interview, available on podcasts as well. Simply search for Market Talk or Astro Awani wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Haris. Thanks for watching and have a good day.